Here we are. It's Happy Half Hour, episode 8. We did not forget about you. We are here. We are ready to have some fun. Are you ready to have some fun? Last week, Al talked about games to play at home, and I thought while I was walking upstairs, I'd pop some questions. If you do a blind tasting with your loved one, hi, Chris Murray. Hi, Paula. Hi, Paul. So good to see you guys. So these are questions that you can ask when you blind that wine on your loved one to kind of get it narrowed down and to see how good their taste buds are and all that good stuff. All right, so here we are at Happy Half Hour. Yes, again, starring Al and Cheryl Kellert. You guys know what comes next. Hi, Virginia Wine Time. Hi, Stacy Tiley. Let's give them a round of applause. Excellent. Hi, Wilson and Karen. Okay, it is go time. Look at those two smiling faces after our busy Saturday Memorial Day weekend. Larry Pryluck checking in saying hi. And Al, we are rolling.
Are we on now?
Yes, we're on now.
Well, welcome again to the Grey Ghost Happy Half Hour. We can't begin to thank you for joining us. We've been on almost 2 solid months now, and thanks to your incredible support, the thousands upon thousands of people who are watching it, our sponsors and advertisers have indicated an overwhelming loyalty to us, so I think this is going to definitely continue, at least for a short period more time, as long as the sponsors are with us. Again, we're right here live at Grey Ghost Studio 2B. We're right here in Amosville. And again, I can't begin to tell you how wonderful sport it is. It was great today. It was almost like normal. And the fact that you're with us at the beginning of the holiday weekend is equally great. We have a lot of material to cover. We even have a new quiz later. We're going to give you the results of the last quiz that we just had. But of course, we always like to start with a little bit of humor. And since we're on Memorial Day, what better way to do it than have a slight military tone to our humor? This admiral was standing on the edge of his battleship when a young lieutenant came up to him and said, "Sir, the enemy is on the horizon." And he said, "In that case, go and get me my red shirt. If I get injured and start to bleed, I don't want the soldiers or the troops to be aware of that." And he said, "Well, actually, sir, there's 15 battleships on the horizon that are on the enemies." "Well, in that case," he said, "forget the red shirt and just bring me my brown pants." With that, again, what a wonderful happy hour. Do I have a question already?
Well, no, not yet, but everybody, some of our oldies but goodies asked if you could talk a little bit louder for our program.
I'll give it a try. Does that help there? Yes? Good. Okay, today's happy hour is going to be the 2018 Vidal. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and pour that for Cheryl and myself prior to asking her the pertinent question that seems to come up every week.
While you're pouring, I just want to let you know that the entire Murray family is packed in one car driving back from Blacksburg and making sure that they don't miss the 8th straight episode that they have watched. But I'm not happy with them saying beat Wahoos.
Whoa, almost forgot. Okay, before we talk about the wine, it's time to give a slight cheer. And now the most pertinent question, Cheryl, if you could give a very brief report about what's transpired this week that was really significant and made you extremely happy. I'm speechless. Once again, she's done exactly what I would have expected, being very succinct and to the point. Now, a little bit about the wine that we're enjoying this evening. And let me just sample it myself. Wow, that's a good wine. I'm really enjoying this. The Vidal Blanc is the name of the grape. It's a very versatile grape. You can make everything from a dry wine. We make a semi-dry in our 2018 Vidal, and we've produced it as our dessert wine, the Adieu. So it can play the whole gamut. One of the nice things about it is there's a number of ways you can produce this wine. In our case, we do a cold fermentation, monitoring the sweetness, so that when we reach the residual sugar we're looking for, the refrigeration is kicked down to 28 degrees. The yeast that we're using is very sensitive to temperature change. It kills the yeast, they fall out, and the result is a very natural sweetness that you're getting from this wine. Now, a lot of people say, how do you accomplish this? A lot of it is the result of custom-made tanks. All of the tanks in the tank room that we have were produced by a company out in Ohio, so they're all American tanks, and they were all made with jackets. Now, a jacketed tank means that that tank can either be refrigerated or heated without touching the wine, and that's on the outside of the tank, making these temperature-controlled tanks. The other thing you'll probably remember if you've ever looked into the tank room is the various sizes. When a winery has a specific size tank, they always have two. The object is always to have one of those tanks empty so you can make wine transfers. So if you look inside our winery, you'll notice that there are multiple size tanks, but there's at least two of any given tank, giving us the ability to move the wine. Now it's time to go to probably something that all of you are just on needles and pins, and that's the result of the quiz that was run twice. After responding of the tens of thousands of responses, every single person who responded got it right. So obviously you all were paying attention. Today we're going to do the special drawing for the winner of the Gewürztraminer, which was going to be the gift for the winner of that competition. And what we're going to do is have Cheryl do the drawing. Oh, we made a mistake. Cheryl has to keep two glasses in her hands to avoid touching her face. So what I'm going to do is the drawing for you. This is a live drawing. Everyone is going to get to witness this themselves. All of the entries are in the large garbage pail that's directly in front of me. The stick that I'm using is exactly 6 feet tall, giving you some indication of how the distance has to be between individuals. Now we're going to stir them up.
Oh, you're doing a great job, Al. You're doing a great job.
Now I'm going to select the winning card. Notice my eyes are closed.
His eyes are closed.
And the winner is, I'll have Cheryl read it. Can you read it?
Lisa Carey, congratulations.
Congratulations, Lisa Carey. Good job. You are the proud winner of a 2019 Gewürztraminer.
I can hear the clap all the way from here.
Whoops. Little off script.
Now, we start one of the more serious portions of the program, and that's questions that have been posed that were brought up. Yes, I see there's a possible question now.
Yes, before we start on last week's question, Paula Dickinson asked, when you kill off the yeast, does it stay with the wine, in reference to the Vidal Blanc?
Very good question. When the yeast is killed, it falls out of the wine going into what's called lees, and that is a sediment that's at the base of the tank. The wine is racked off the lees. It's moved away from the sediment. The sediment is then taken into the vineyard where it's spread into the vineyard so that we can take that cultured yeast and overwhelm any wild yeast. But it's specifically separated from the wine.
And now we will proceed to questions from last week.
The first question actually came in 2 weeks ago, and this is Paul from New Hampshire. Being a northerner, he was very interested in knowing about the name Grey Ghost. Many of you are familiar with it. We're located at what was called the southern end of Mosby's Confederacy. Colonel John Singleton Mosby was given the nickname by Abraham Lincoln after a raid on Fairfax Courthouse where he captured a Union general behind enemy lines. Once Lincoln found out about the loss of a general, he was asked about it, and he said, "I can create a better general with the stroke of a pen. My problem is he stole 37 horses that were worth $125 apiece." He then went to his commanding officers of Northern Virginia and said, "What are we going to do with this scoundrel Mosby? What is he, some sort of a gray ghost?" And thus the nickname stuck. Mosby ended up after the war. I should mention too, Mosby was not excited about Virginia seceding, but like many young men back then, they were more loyal to their state than they were to the Union. So once the state seceded, Mosby followed suit. Once the war was over, he became a very close personal friend of Grant's, became a Republican. He was ostracized by the South for going off in the other direction, and actually in his memoirs said one of the best things that happened to the South was it lost, because it brought the Union back together. So he was a very interesting man, a very colorful man, and one who did a lot for this country as bringing them back together. Paul, you also asked an interesting question about wines on the list at the Inn of Little Washington. Our wine has been on that list. We're researching right now whether or not they're sold out. They have carried our reserve Cabernet on their wine list in the past. Thank you for bringing it up, and we'll do a little research on our end. Rolinda, you had a very good question about the size of our production on a very good year. I'm afraid that the 2020 may prove to be on the other side of a good year, but under a good conditions, like in 2019, we produced roughly 3,000+ cases. Now a case is 12 bottles, so you can pretty well figure the number of bottles that were actually produced. Carrie asked a really interesting question about the 2003 Cabernet Sauvignon, whether or not she should go ahead and uncork it and drink it. Carrie, you stimulated Cheryl and me to have a 2003 last night with a steak. The wine is definitely ready to drink. I think it's reached its plateau and is maybe heading on the other side. Interestingly enough, the longer the wine was opened, the more it developed into a classic Cabernet. So yes, definitely go and have your 2003 and let it breathe a little bit. I think you're going to find it's going to actually improve. Sherry, you asked about soil composition and whether or not we do anything in the way of evaluating our soil and checking it through an extension service. Cheryl and I had the soil evaluated by Virginia Tech when we purchased this property back in 1986. At that time, the one thing they mentioned was there was a slight degree of acidity in the soil and definitely needed a little fertilizer. However, they warned us that with grapes, you do not want very rich soil. So our vines are fertilized about once every 4 years with a small amount of 10-10-10 fertilizer, just a basic fertilizer. The idea is not to over-fertilize it. If you do, all you're generating is foliage, and that is something you don't want on a vine. You want your fruit exposed. So for that reason, our vineyards are not reevaluated, and we do maintain a certain amount of fertilizer, but a very low concentration. Sherry, you also asked about the size of our property when we had 100 vines. Cheryl and I thought about that a little bit, and the best we can recollect was it was on about 1/4 of an acre. and actually it was only about half of that was in vines. So let's say, for the sake of argument, about 1/8 of an acre was in vines, whereas the whole property was a little better than 1/4 of an acre. Pam, you asked about the 2003-2004 ado and the different sizes of bottles. I think you mentioned it was unopened, would it be lost if your refrigeration broke down, if I'm not mistaken? Quite frankly, ado is one of the more unique white wines. It will age over time. It takes on more of a golden characteristic and often actually develops a raisin characteristic. So if you have older bottles, they won't be the same as the young, but they're definitely still very drinkable. Amy, I think I've gotten through all of the questions that were posed to us. Are there any other questions that are coming up?
No, nothing just yet. Everybody is rapt with attention.
Okay, now it's time for the research. Amy, hold up the research for a little bit, and I've got it.
Here we go. Oh, so many signs. Uh-oh. Lisa Carey, did you tune in from the beginning? If you didn't, you're going to have to watch the rerun because there's something important for you to see. When you plant new vines, do you purposely remove fruit to encourage more vine growth? That's from Jonathan Carpenter.
A very, very good question. The answer is yes. You don't want to carry fruit for about the first 3 years. During that period of time, you want all of the energy to go into the vine. So we will remove the fruit, giving us more of a growth on the vine before we start to carry fruit in it. Okay, I think we're ready for our research. Today, the research is on oak. And one of the things that Cheryl and I wanted to do is talk a little bit about oak, the levels of oak, and what we have are 4 wines that we've poured that I'll be discussing. Each wine has a different degree of oak or none at all. All, of course, are Chardonnay. Now, the first wine we're going to look at is a stainless steel Chardonnay that was actually produced cold and bottled out of the steel. So I'm going to take a smell. Oh, very interesting. Cheryl, would you mind taking a smell?
Indeed, very interesting.
What are you detecting?
I'm detecting it's probably stainless steel fermented.
Very good. And are you picking up that really nice Granny Smith apple character?
Definitely, definitely.
The thing that's interesting about this wine, and you can almost see it, steel has a tendency to almost show itself. So you'll notice that it almost looks like there's real steel in this wine. Now we're going to go to a wine that's slightly oaked. This wine was put in barrels that were a little bit older and only was in oak for about 3 months. Cheryl, what do you detect?
Ever so a hint of oak.
Ever so a hint of oak. And what is the flavor of oak that you're going to be picking up? A little vanilla, maybe?
A little vanilla character. Mm-hmm.
Okay, you'll notice again, because it's slightly oaked, it almost is visual. You almost get a feeling that you're looking at something almost like a toothpick. Now we're going to go to a wine that is actually medium oaked.
Larry Prylick, you're hilarious. He said you nailed the first one.
Oh, Cheryl.
Good job.
Do you pick up?
Oh, there's definitely more oak in this one. Woo, I can really smell it.
I actually think this barrel may have been slightly toasted. Are you picking up
Definitely
a little toast? You'll notice again that due to the fact that this wine has been in oak a little longer, it's a little more visible, a little more directly at you. The wine itself was on oak for about 8 months, and these barrels were slightly newer than the previous barrel. Now we're going to get to the very rich oaked barrel. This next wine is a wine that takes on the rich characteristic of beautiful oak, all brand new, just a velvety finish. Cheryl?
Oh, the oak is much more prominent.
And distinct.
And distinct.
I just find this incredible. You would almost, again, visualize the amount of oak that has to be in this wine in order to get that magnificent characteristic. I would look at this as a rich, heavily oaked California-style Chardonnay. Now, we've gone through the 3 types of Chardonnays and the different types of oak. But seriously, now it's time to talk for real. There are several different types of barrels that are oak. All of them are white oak. We use a combination of French and Hungarian. We used to use American oak as well. All of the wine that we produce goes into French oak with the exception of our Céval. Céval is very similar to a Sauvignon Blanc, and we produce our Céval in the same fashion that Robert Mondavi used to produce his Fumé Blanc, a slightly oaked Sauvignon Blanc. Hungarian oak is so tightly grained that as you're sipping this wine, you're really not getting any oak characteristics, but it has given this wine the ability to breathe, which is one of the beauties of an oak barrel. American oak has a tendency to be very open-grained and will literally overpower the wine. And that's one of the reasons why Cheryl and I began phasing this out about 15 years ago. And it was totally phased out over the last 8 years. American oak also is a barrel that has a tendency to be a little more aromatic and a little open in grain. So we were finding many of these barrels actually leaked when we first got them. So for that reason, we've now phased them out. The result is all of the oak we use is all French oak. And we use 3 forests from the French area, the Allier, the Nevers, and the Vosges. Each one of those forests produce wood that's slightly different and therefore gives us different characteristics in the wine. I should mention that all of our Chardonnays and all of our reserve Cabernets have always gone into French oak. They have never been in American oak. Only the other reds were going into American oak. Another thing that's very important to know about barrels is toast. A barrel is actually toasted on the inside. A whiskey barrel is charred. And for that reason, a whiskey takes on much more of a golden characteristic as compared to a little more of a yellowish characteristic coming out of a French oak barrel. We use what's called a medium toast light, which means the inside of the barrel is basically toasted to merely caramelize the oak sugars, giving a perception of sweetness even though the wine is bone dry. If you looked in the barrel at the time we first purchased them, you can actually see the grain in the oak. I should also mention that one of the things that Cheryl and I are very proud of is we always bring in new barrels from France. We never use any barrels that have come from another winery or have been previously used. Our philosophy is we don't want to inherit somebody else's problem, and I think you could all understand that. Therefore, we know that we can guarantee our customers that the wines that are being produced here are going to be produced as flawlessly as we possibly can make them. I think that pretty well covers the questions. Now I think it's time to do our new questionnaire, or our new quiz. So.
Hang on, I dropped one of my signs. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to have to move the screen a second.
Okay. Now we can go into the new quiz. What we're going to do is give you a little longer to respond rather than just the 20 minutes. We found that there were some people last week that were having a hard time connecting. So what we're going to do is give you an hour to respond after the program is over. The first question is, what performance did Al and Cheryl see on their first date? Was it Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons? Was it the Temptations? Was it Bob Hope? How about Prince? Or none of the above? The second question deals with winemaking. When did Al make his first wine? Was it in 1966, 1969, 1971, 1974, or none of the above? And last but not least, and everybody better get this one right, what was Amy and Cheryl's favorite wine or wines? Was it the Vidal Blanc? Was it the Reserve Chardonnay and the Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon? Was it the Ranger Reserve and Petit Verdot? Was it the Gewürztraminer? Or was it none of the above?
Now I'm going to flash up where you're going to send your winning answers. Remember, you have to get all 3 correct in order to be entered into the drawing. And you will want to send that to, here you go, kids, replies@greyghostvineyards.com. Replies@greyghostvineyards. You have 1 hour. Go.
Now we have a little bit of time to talk about family history. And if you remember, 2 weeks ago, we said we were going to start expanding the family. I cleared the information that I'm about to give you with Amy and Becca to make sure that I wasn't giving a secret information that I shouldn't. Let's start with Amy. We used to go on an annual basis to a wine conference called Wineries Unlimited, located in Pennsylvania, Lancaster. In 1997, Amy went with us and kept running into this individual winemaker from Prince Michel. Of course, I thought he was after my advice, so I was more than willing to provide him with anything that he could possibly ask. Cheryl finally said, "Al, leave him alone. I think he's chasing Amy." They ended up dating, and that was Tom Payette. Tom then came to us and asked us for her hand. In trade, he gave us a 1.5-liter bottle of Leduc Cabernet out of the Napa Valley, which was the wine that he was making. Of course, I personally thought I got the better deal, but that's beside the point. It was shortly after that, while he was there, that I decided that I would give him some good fatherly advice. However, I panicked, ran to answer the telephone, and left Cheryl all by herself with Tom. After 3 years of dating, they got married in 2000, and now we were up to 5 in the family. Amy and Tom then blessed us with Andrea Payette in 2003, which brought the family to 6. And then their son, Thomas, was born in 2005, and now we hit the magic odd number, and is, by the way, a prime number of 7. Now let's flip over to Al. We thought Al was going to be a confirmed bachelor until 2004, when he went on a blind date. They met he and this young lady met at a party. Neither one had wanted to go to this date, but they were talked into it by family members and friends. They ended up sitting on the front porch at the home where the party was being conducted and started talking. Each of them found out that they had relatives in Galesburg, Illinois. How could that be possible? Becca's first concern was, are we related? Obviously, you can imagine that would have been a little bit dicey. They continued to date until 2006, when Al finally got the guts up to ask her for her hand. And they got married in 2006, and now we were up to 8. The family then expanded at the birth of Caitlin in 2012, where we reached the magic number of 9. And then in 2015, they blessed us with Albert, giving us our 10th individual in the family, and by the way, the 5th generation of Albert Kellerts. So that gives you a real quick update of how the family went from 2 to 4 all the way up to 10. Now it's time to close off this segment of humor, and I thought it would be, or a program, and I thought it would be nice to give you one last piece of humor associated with the military. The king was standing on the top of the castle when his knight came in from the battlefield, and he asked his knight, how did the battle go? And he said, it was a busy but very good day. On the Western Front, we pillaged and burned villages. We killed and raped the citizens. All in all, it was truly spectacular. The king looked at him and said, but I have no enemies on the Western Front. And the knight said, you do now.
Bada bing.
With that, thank you all once again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week when we'll be enjoying the Chardonnay.
So be sure to get your 2018 Chardonnay, because we'll talk a little bit more about oak next week. Just a reminder, look at those cuties cheering. Send in your contest entries to replies@Grey-Ghost-Vineyards. And finally, this edition has been brought to you by Grey-Ghost-Vineyards. Thanks for watching.